Welcome to the Encore Audio Archives YouTube channel. I'm Taper Dave, and this is my channel. I've uploaded hundreds of talks here that I've recorded at meetings in West LA, and I've also recorded conventions starting in 2013. I've got a bunch of those up. And Walt and Mary Murray, the original owners of Encore Audio Archives, started the company in the 80s, and Walt recorded Joe and Charlie's and a bunch of stuff down in Vista, California. My sobriety date is June 20th of 1994. I hope you find something you like, so please like and subscribe to my channel and comment down below. If you want to hear something that I don't have or that you don't see, I'll see that I get it. Anyways, take care and have a great day if you want to.
I have my hooker shoes on, so I have to put this up. Hi, my name is Lynn Angelette, and I'm a very grateful member of Al-Anon. And I talk fast and I talk loud, and you're going to think afterwards that I'm the alcoholic and Bruce is the Al-Anon. And to believe me, if the alcohol had worked for me, I would be the alcoholic, but it didn't. My drink has two legs, and that's just the way it is. I don't want to spend a lot of time before I got in Al-Anon because I want to... Oh, first I got to take my watch off. You can tell my age. She has a cell phone. I have a watch. Anyway... I didn't grow up in an alcoholic home. My parents were nice, hard-working people. I mean, we had our stuff, but they weren't alcoholic. There are a few things that were said or done in the house that influenced my life, the rest of my life, especially until I got into Al-Anon. One was that my mother did everything for me because she loved me so much, and I interpreted that as that I was not capable of doing anything for myself. I know that was not her intention, but that's how it happened. I was taught to read. By the way, so you don't have to guess, I came into Al-Anon when I was 27 years old. I've been in Al-Anon 28 years old. I am officially a senior citizen this year. So in case you can't do the math, I'm 55. So when I learned to read by sight, and I did not learn how to sound out words, and I read very slowly. And my brother and sister, I'm the youngest of three, told me that I was stupid my whole growing up, and that had a lot of influence on me when I got older. Also, being the youngest of three, I learned how to manipulate very young. You hit your brother, then he hits you back, you cry, and he gets in trouble. It works very well. My whining worked really well, too, until I met Bruce, and it didn't work on him, so I had to stop doing it. When I was growing up, my mother said, you marry a man of your same religious background that is going to be a professional and you'll be happy the rest of your life. So when I was 15 and a half, I met this boy that was 16, and he met my mother's qualifications, so I took him hostage for the next 10 years. I have to tell you, my story is like Goldilocks and the Three Bears. My ex-husband didn't drink, and he was too boring. I then went to a practicing alcoholic, and he was too exciting, and now I'm married to a sober alcoholic, and he's just right. So... I took this man hostage. We went all through high school and college together. I couldn't drop out of college because when I started, my mother said, "You are our last hope for a college graduate." And so I couldn't face my mother. So I graduated. I got married, and we were both really boring. I mean, I used to think it was him, but we were both so boring. And I learned this phrase in Al-Anon. It sounded much better. So I had an overlapping relationship while I was still married. I met the man whose drinking bothered me, and I didn't know anything about alcoholism. I thought you had to carry your bottle in a bag and you had to wear a trench coat, and that made you an alcoholic, and he wore a three-piece suit and worked in a bank. So I made my ex-husband's life so miserable that he asked me for a divorce, and I came through looking very sweet and nice, and I left, and I moved to, because I couldn't find an alcoholic in California. We don't have enough, so I found one in Houston, Texas. So I moved to Texas, and 2 weeks after I got there, he got a job offer in California. Actually, he got offered my job because I had met him through work in California, and we moved back to California. And I have to tell you, even during that time in Texas, I knew something was wrong, but my pride and my ego said, you have to make this work. You just left your marriage. So I remember one night, one of his friends came over from work, and they started drinking, and they drank, and then he said he had to help him get home. Now, the guy lived in walking distance, and that was the first time, he got home at 4 in the morning, and I said, where were you? And he said, we were just at his apartment. Well, my keen Al-Anon eyes saw he had a stamp on his hand. So the next morning I asked him about it, and he said, we went to a strip joint and we didn't like it and we came right home. Now, I believed that, and I believed everything he told me for the next 3 years because I knew he wouldn't lie to me. And you know, we moved back to California, and that's where my insanity started. I mean, at least when he did it, he was drunk and in a blackout. I did this all stone sober. I'm ashamed to say. You know, the only violence in that house was me. He'd call my mother a four-letter word, and I'd slap him in the face. I was raging. I was, you know, my solutions were worse than the problems. You know, this man I thought had so much class. We'd go to parties, and he'd be drinking, and he'd run out of cigarettes, and smoke other people's cigarette butts out the ashtrays, you know. And the alcoholics are fine as long as they're in a box and they're not embarrassing me. But, you know, so what did I do? I'd carry a pack of cigarettes for him. You know, I mean, it seemed like a logical solution to me. You know, I was also one of those that we'd get in an argument, and I'd say, let me out of the car, and he would. And and I'd walk home, and I'd think he'd be waiting there. No, he'd go to the bar. You know, he wasn't waiting there. You know, and every night I would iron his cotton shirts, and this is how you iron them. You know, you have to hit the ironing board so they know how mad you are that you're ironing them. And when I got into Al-Anon, they said, did he ever ask you to iron a shirt? I said, no. They said, get off the cross. We need the wood. So I did all those things for you because I thought, why would you love me if I wasn't cooking for you and cleaning for you and doing all those things? I mean, I was so sick after Bruce and I got married. He had a cleaning lady. I said, oh, no, you can let her go. I'll take care of it all. My first contrary action when I got into Al-Anon was to get that cleaning lady back. You know, but I do have to say, you know, I believe that, you know, God takes care of me and everything happens when it's supposed to. So in November, we decided not to live together anymore, and I moved home to my parents' house. And I'll be forever grateful for that because in January my mother was killed in a car accident, and I had those 2 months at home to make amends to my mother and to have a relationship with her. And you know, when my mother was killed, I was 25, and you know, I didn't know how to deal with death, and you know, I was angry. And my father said when he called me, you kids have to be strong for me. So I didn't cry, I didn't anything. I just stuffed all those feelings. I remember going back to work, and I knew this relationship was falling apart, and I knew that my mother had just died. And I remember somebody saying to me in the hall, what's wrong? You don't look happy. I said, oh, I don't know. Must just be having a bad day. And I put on that phony smile one more time because I couldn't let you know I was dying inside. I just couldn't. And, you know, but before this happened in December was probably my bottom with this man, or at least it should have been, but I wasn't smart enough to have it be my bottom. We went to his company Christmas party, and I don't know how you guys drank, but first they had to go to lunch and drink, and then we had to meet at a bar so they could drink some more so they were ready for the party. So, we don't give advice in Al-Anon, but when you know somebody's drank that much and they say, why don't you leave your car at the bar, it's really not a good idea. But I didn't want to argue, so we did, and we went down to the party, and it was down by the beach in Santa Monica. And when he fell on the dance floor in front of his bosses, we decided maybe it was time to leave. And so he drove me down to the beach, and one more time he said, get out of the car, and I did. And, you know, and I walked back to my car. I started walking back to my car, which, you know, and I couldn't go down Santa Monica or Wilshire because somebody might see me. So I picked Colorado, the darkest street, so I'm going to walk back to my car, 26 blocks. And, you know, I'm part of the way, and this man pulled over, and he asked me for directions, and I didn't know where he was going. And then he made a U-turn, and he said, look, obviously you're in trouble, and you need to get back to your car. And if this wasn't my higher power taking care of me, he said, I promise I won't touch you. I'll take you back to your car. I have another car that needs to be jump-started if you'll help me. And, you know, I got in the car with that man, and he drove me to my car, and he indeed had another car that needed to be jump-started. We went over and tried to jump-start it. And even after all that, and the only thing that man ever asked me for was my work phone number, and he called me the next day to make sure I got home okay. Now, I have to tell you, even after all that, the first thing I did was drive by that man's apartment, and he wasn't home. So I drove all the way back to the San Fernando Valley, and my mother said, he's been arrested for drunk driving. We have to go bail him out of jail. We went and bailed him out of jail, and I didn't know anything about blackouts. And so when we got in the car, he asked me why I left the party with the girl he works with. And I told him what happened. He called me a liar in front of my parents. And I knew it was over, you know. So I got home at like 2 in the morning. But I'm responsible. I'm an Al-Anon. I got up at 5 and went to work because I can't let any of you know that my life is not perfect. And I get to work, and I'm done. I'm so done in this relationship until he called me with those 3 magic words. I need you. So I was right back there because this time he needed me. And then my mom died, and then he called me the end of January. He said, I'm really sick. You need to take me in the hospital. And I took him to the hospital, and And they told us he had hepatitis, and my first thought was, oh, good, he won't be able to drink. And all the guilt that goes along with, I love this man, and I'm glad he's sick. And then a month later, when he told me he could drink again, I believed him. Again, I didn't think he'd lie to me. You know, and we kept playing this game. We were both miserable. We kept playing this game. And then in October, because I never leave without another in the wings, I played this fantasy in my head like everything was fine. I kept pretending. And then I was at work one day, and it was Bruce's last day at work. And talk about God intervening. I was a manager, and this girl that worked for me said, my daughter wants to see have a picture of, see what my boss looks like. Can you come outside, and I'm going to take your picture? And so I went outside, and Bruce was loading up his car. He was starting his own business, so he was leaving the company. And he asked him for my phone number. At least this time I didn't really overlap, because I gave him my phone number, and the next day I broke off this relationship. So that was pretty good, 24 hours, you know. That was a vast improvement. You know, and on our first date, he told me he was a sober member of Alcoholics Anonymous. My first thought was, this cannot be happening to me again. They are cute, though, you know. Bruce thought I was in my 30s. I thought he was in his 30s. When he found out I was 26 and he was 42, it was a little awkward moment. But you know, we started dating, and on one of our first dates, he took me to hear his story. He spoke at Ohio Street, and I have to tell you, that's way more information than a date should hear about you. So there were no secrets, you know. But Bruce was really nice. He did things like he opened the door for me, and he paid on dates, and he brought me flowers. And I asked him why he was so nice, because I didn't think I deserved to be treated that nice. And so we were dating 3 months to the day. We started dating on November 14th, and on Valentine's Day, he asked me to marry him. And I thought he was crazy. I dated my ex-husband for 7.5 years, and so he explained to me that in AA, 3 months was a long-term relationship. But there were two things that he said to me that day. He said, first of all, that his program would come first, and he would go to 3 to 5 meetings a week for the rest of his life. And if I couldn't live with that, then we couldn't get married. And, you know, I can't say how the alcoholics in your life are going to do their sobriety, but Bruce is 34 years next week, 33. In 2 weeks, he'll be 34 years sober, and he still goes to 4 or 5 meetings a week, sometimes 6. And, you know, the other thing he said to me was that if God wanted us to be together, there was nothing I was going to do to mess it up. And if God didn't want us to be together, there was nothing I was going to do to keep us together. So if I gained 5 pounds, he wasn't out the door. But on the other hand, if I held him by the ankles, he wasn't staying. And so, you know, this is when the story, we both have our little interpretation. I thought, like, 6 weeks later, I woke up one morning and just said, Bruce, I'm ready to get married. And he said, the train is leaving, get on or get off. But I don't remember, you know. So somewhere in between, you know, that happened. So we got married, and in August we'll be married 29 years, and we still like each other, which I think is pretty good. And many of you know Milton and Ruby, and Milton was Bruce's sponsor, and Ruby took me to my first Al-Anon meeting, and I was bad. I was, you know, so I went, and, you know, they said there were no children allowed, so I got a resentment. I didn't have any children, but I got a resentment, you know. All I remember saying, this lady saying that her husband dropped his socks in the living room, and she stepped over him and didn't pick him up, and everybody started clapping, and I thought, I must be in the wrong room, you know. And it took me 6 months to go to my second meeting, because I just thought, you know, this isn't for me. And I remember standing in our house. I remember thinking I had all the, you know, if only I had this, I'd be happy. I had the house, I had the job, I had the husband, and I still didn't like myself. And I still, so I decided to go back to a meeting. I went to a meeting on a Thursday night in St. John's Hospital, and it seemed to me that they were all 100 years old. They're probably all younger than me now, but it seemed to me they were all very, very old. And but God took care of me, because I was sitting there, and somebody else was sitting there where Sandy is, and she stood up and she said her boyfriend was 4.5 years sober, and she's never seen him take a drink. And you know what? Bruce was 4.5 years sober, and she was younger than me. And I said to her, are there meetings with younger people? And she said, Monday night I'll be in Marina Del Rey. I'll have a seat for you. And so I showed up. Then she said, tomorrow night I'll be in Culver City. I'll have a seat for you. So I showed up. She goes, Friday night I'll be at Chelsea and Wilshire. I'll have a seat for you. Now, you didn't need to save seats at my meetings. But you know what? I knew she was going to be there, and she had a seat for me. So I kept showing up. And, I wasn't one of those. I'd come home and I'd say, how long do I have to go to these meetings? And Bruce would say, until you want to. And, my first sponsor was 6 more months than I did on the program because I didn't want to ask anybody that might ask me to work the steps or go to meetings. And, but she was the perfect sponsor for me because, you know what? When I called her once a month to check in, she just loved me, and she shared her spirituality with me, and she had a wonderful spiritual program, and I'll be forever grateful for that. But I was a year in the program, and Bruce would say, no self-respecting AA would have their first birthday without doing a 4-step inventory. And I said, well, in Al-Anon, we do it in our own way and pace. And so... But I was feeling guilty, so I asked somebody to sponsor me who had 19 years on the program. She had a very different idea of sponsorship. The first thing she said is we're going to work steps 1 through 12 without skipping 2 to 11 in the middle. And her favorite word was write. Call me back when you've written. And, and I worked the steps. I had to admit I was powerless over everything, that the only thing I can change is my attitude, and that... And, the insanity. How many times did I do the same thing over and over and expected different results? Oh, this time when he comes home drunk and I yell at him, we're not going to get in a fight. He's going to say, I've seen the light. Probably not, The third step, turning my will and my life over to the care of God. I did that the best I could. I have to tell you, I am a slow learner. I probably didn't. I acted as if for a lot of years in this program. A lot of years until I really felt like that God that was in me, and that I could trust that. And for me, I had to look back at experiences and see how I thought something would be the worst thing, and it led to something so much better. So it took me a long time, but I did the 3rd step prayer with my sponsor, and I read her my 4th step, which was 120 of the most boring autobiography pages you'd ever read in your life. And the miracle is she didn't fall asleep, and then she asked me if I wanted to burn it, and I didn't have that much self-esteem, so I didn't. I do have to tell you, because when you do it with other people, you do what you know. And when you burn them, it's not a good idea to burn them in your kitchen sink when you have curtains right above it. The next time I told somebody we should do it in their barbecue, and they said, no, let's do it in our sink, and we set off the fire alarms in her apartment. So really, there are ways to do this, not the ways I do it. Once I read her my 5th step, I heard those 2 words that have saved my life. Me too. Because you know what? We've all done different things, but we've all had the same feelings. I love Debbie when she said, no, I'm not enough. I'm not enough. And that's all of us. I did everything motivated in my life by fear. I didn't know you all feel fearful too. Fear of failure was my biggest thing, or fear of not pleasing you. And that's what I did. And so when my sponsor gave a list of character defects she saw in my inventory, which I walked in with no character defects, she said, are you entirely ready to have God remove them? Well, one of them was people-pleasing. So, of course, I said I was entirely ready to have God remove them, Some of them I'm still a little comfortable with today, but they just visit. And she made an 8-step list for me, and then I had to make my 9th step. And I just need to share 2 of my amends. One was to my ex-husband, and somebody said to me, you just tell him you're sorry for your part in the breakup of the marriage. He doesn't need to know anything that might hurt him. So I called him, and my worst nightmare happened. His wife answered, and so I thought, oh God, she's going to think I want him back. So I go through this whole thing. I'm in this program, blah, 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 blah. And, it took him a couple of days to call me back. But when he called me back, after I made my amends, he said, you were young and you don't owe me an amends. And then he said, the hurt goes away. And, he was the first person that confronted me with the fact I could hurt somebody. I thought it was all that you hurt me, but I'm very capable of doing that too. And that was really important to me. My second was to my father. And when I told him my amends, which I did in dramatic fashion, he said, did I tell you I have a date Thursday night? And I realized the amends was for me, but I also made a living amends, I made amends to my mother's graveside, but my real amends to my mother was that my father, I was the best daughter I could be with my father. And, when my father was diagnosed with leukemia, and we knew that it was Bruce and I that would have to take care of him in our home because my brother and sister couldn't for whatever reasons. And you know what I did for those 4 months? And I did those things that, that you taught me how to be of service. You know, I changed his diapers. I did all those things that I never thought I could do because I gave back to him what he gave to me so freely. And, you know, I hadn't worked for those 4 months, and I went to work that one day, and my dad said, "Oh, stay here." My brother and sister were there, and he said, "Oh, everybody stay here today." And I went to work, and when I was done, I called Bruce, and he said, "You know, Dad was taken to the hospital in an ambulance, but come home. He has time." And so I came home, and I changed, and I went to the hospital, and I stayed with him until he died. And I felt guilty for so many years that I had left that day. And somebody said to me, "Perhaps your brother and sister needed time alone with him. You had 4 months alone with them without them." And I choose to believe that's you know what it was. You know, the 10th step, I try to take a daily inventory because I really don't want to have to do another 120-page inventory. It was not a lot of fun. The 11th step, thank you to Jay, I now know how to meditate. I meditated this morning. Yay. And the 12th step, I hope I'm always willing to carry the message. So what happened is I got really busy in service. I was intergroup. I was secretary. I did all these things, you know. And when we decided that we wanted to have a baby, and God had other plans for us, and we tried, and people in these rooms laughed with us and cried with us when we went through our infertility treatment. And when I wound up in the hospital one more time with complications, we decided that God whispers to you, and if he doesn't whisper, he shouts, and it was time to stop. And I'd never surrendered to anything, and Bruce and I got on our knees, and Bruce actually swore at God I had never done that, and said that if he wanted us to carry his message and not have a child, that we could live with that. And this is my burning bush spiritual awakening. The next week, a woman came up to me that worked for me part-time, said, "I work part-time in a gynecologist's office, and there's a woman there that wants to give a baby up for adoption. Would you like to talk to her?" And so we talked to her, and she chose us, and this was in March, and in August she had a beautiful baby boy, and you were all there for us. And we had that boy for 13 days, and then the mother called and changed her mind. And Milton got there before Bruce, and Milton held us, and he said the Serenity Prayer, and he said, "God doesn't take anything away from you unless he's going to replace it with something better, but when you're in the hallway, it can be and hurt." And my friend Jack says, "You put up curtains in the hall to make it as pleasant as possible." And you all said to us, "Keep on trying whenever you fail." And we went back to another lawyer, and in October of 1986, we got a call that there was a baby boy in Portland, Oregon that was 4.5 months old, that his mother wanted to give him up for adoption. And we flew up to Portland, and we came home with our son, Jason. And I have to tell you, he is better than the first. And now, those of you who I shared with during his teenage years will ignore that part of his life. But, you know, and my sponsor said to me I'd have to go to daytime babysitting meetings. And I said, "They're not hip, slick, and cool during the day." And she said, "Someday you'll be grateful for this." And I was. Jason grew up around a room full of Alatots, and they all went to babysitting meetings together, and then we all went to the park, and it was a wonderful time. And, you know, I was really active my first 4 years in Al-Anon. And then, you know, someone said, you can have it all, but you don't have to have it all at the same time. And then when he was younger, I took time off, and I just made a commitment to my regular meetings, and I did that until he was a teenager. And then I got really involved in service, and this is the reality of what happened. He was the perfect child in elementary school, and then he hit junior high school. And it was such a struggle, and we, too, ignored because we didn't know what to do, and no matter what I did, it didn't work, and he wouldn't do it my way. And by 8th grade, he was flunking out of junior high school, and so it became necessary for us to put him in private school, and we said to everybody, "We can't afford it." And they said, "Can you afford it this year?" And we said, "Yes." And they said, "You better trust that God will give you the money next year for it." And so he went through that. And during his teenage years, I became so active in Al-Anon because you all told me how wonderful I was, and I wasn't getting that at home. At home, I couldn't deal with him. I tried so hard. Bruce's business had fallen apart. I went back to school during this time. I got my degree, so I got my kudos there. Al-Anon was telling me I was wonderful. I was getting my degree. We moved out to Valencia. I started working full-time, and I thought if I don't talk to him, if I don't whatever, then it will get better, and it didn't get better. And my sponsor, I had changed sponsors at this time. My sponsor had 5 kids, and I would call her and say, blah, 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 and she'd say, "Oh, that's nothing, don't worry," you know, and I was really involved in service, and in his teenage years, I can't remember a lot of happy memories, I really can't, and then we got to his senior year of high school, and And the Monday before his graduation, after we'd spent a lot of money on this school, they called and said he owes 3 papers. If he doesn't write them, he's not graduating. And so I called my family in Utah and Las Vegas and said, you know what, there may not be a graduation. You can come out anyway. And my sister's screaming at me, write the papers. And I thought, I have to go back to when I went to graduate school. First of all, when I was 30, somebody in Al-Anon told me that I was not stupid because I read slowly. It just meant I read slowly. It didn't mean I was stupid. And when I went to graduate school, my parents helped me all through school, and they always wanted to take credit. Oh, yeah, it should say Lynn and family on the report card, and I never felt good about myself. And when I went to graduate school, I got that master's degree by myself. Bruce did proof my papers, I do have to say that, but I wrote them all myself. And you know what? I knew what it felt like to stand up there and get that diploma and know it was mine and that I had earned it, and I was not going to take that dignity away from him. So 3 hours before his graduation, we got a call that he was graduating, and they said, oh, he knew. He just didn't want to tell you. He thought it was pretty funny. Today it's funny, not so funny back then. And he went... You know, and he went to college, and he came back, and he went to college, and he came back, and he went to college. And then we had to have that discussion. You are either in college, oh, and here you have to add this, and getting credits, because he knew how to be in college, he just wasn't getting credits, or getting credits, or you're self-supporting through your own voluntary contribution. And we had to hear that, you don't support my dream, blah, 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 you know, and you know, he went back to college, and he was in and out and in and out. And, you know, I finally got to let go of that he didn't need to be in college, that maybe he would never graduate college. He has ADHD. He's smarter than anybody I know, but he may not ever graduate college. And I let go of that. This year has been my year of tremendous growth. Actually, the last 4 years, my friend Nancy, who is out there somewhere, who I've sponsored for over 20 years, we decided we needed to grow more. We did that whole entire new blueprint for progress. Took us 4 years because we don't live near each other. We did that whole thing. I wrote inventory after inventory. Nancy and I are now answering the questions in the paths to recovery. And, you know, my recovery with Jason started in February when I went to the San Fernando Valley Convention, and somebody said that you have to love the best in them and not fear the worst in them. And we had told that child last summer when he went berserk and he made 2 holes in doors that he could never live in our house again. And that was really painful to do. And he went away, and then he came back. And you know what? He got an apartment, and you know what? He's now home. And you know what? God's giving us a chance to do this relationship, to do a do-over, you know. It started with that in February. Then a couple of weeks ago, I took all those inventories I'd written about him as a teenager. I said to Bruce, oh, my God, if I die before you burn all my journals, nobody will come to my funeral. And so I took all those journals that were about Jason that I worried always that he'd find them, and I shredded them. And I felt so free that I could do that. And you know what? Now, in our rebuilding, it's great. You know, when I come home at night, he'll say, let's go to the park and play Frisbee. And we play Frisbee. And that's when he talks to me about the crazy women he likes in his life. He may not be an alcoholic, I don't know, but he's certainly an Al-Anon. You know, and we have that time. And, you know, on Wednesday, he turned 25, and I got to carry on a tradition that my mother did, and that's while your children live at home, we stayed up till midnight to wish him a happy birthday. So I stayed up till midnight. I knocked on his door, and my idea was, God and I have different ideas. Okay, Jason, happy birthday. He goes, let's talk, Mom. So we talked till 1 in the morning, and I just started loving on him. I stopped ignoring him, and I started loving on him for the man he is, not the man he's supposed to be, not the man I think he should be. And, you know, when we left for the convention, he hugged me and told me he loved me, you know, and he hasn't done that in a lot of years. And I'm so grateful for all of you that shared with me during his teenage years about your story. You all had grown kids and looked relatively sane, so I figured at some point I would be relatively sane again. And I want to thank the committee for having us. Bruce and I have had a ball. Deborah and Carlos, they are phenomenal. You guys have to get to know them. They are phenomenal. We love you a lot. And thank you, everybody.
Thank you so much, Lynn, for sharing your experience, strength, and hope with us. I forgot to make a little quick announcement about the flags on the table. If you could please keep them there. The Decorations Committee needs them, so please don't remove the flags on the table. Sorry, I forgot to announce that in the very beginning. I have asked Carlos M. to introduce our AA speaker, Bruce A. of Valencia.
We hope you've enjoyed this recording. To obtain additional copies, receive a free catalog of AA and Al-Anon talks, or to find out about our tape and CD of the Month Club, call Encore Audio Archives at 1-800-878-1308 or visit our website at www.12steptapes.com.
My name is Carlos, and I'm an alcoholic. Grateful to be here and grateful to be sober. I'd like to thank Kathy W. for giving us the opportunity to be of service. I've never really hosted a couple before, and thank goodness for Kathy. She gives very, very clear direction. And I'm very, very grateful that I'm able to take direction today. So as the direction said, I called our speakers a week before. And they put me on speakerphone, and we're talking, and immediately I feel the love and the passion that they have for this program. And I feel the love and the passion that they have for each other. So we set up a time to meet here, and we get in, and we're sitting around and getting them up to their room. We give them this nice little basket, and just really grateful to be able to meet a couple like them. And Bruce, he's a quiet man, as am I, so we got along really, really well. But, I stand up here today, and I admire Bruce very, very much because our lives parallel. Our children, my youngest son suffers from the same disease as their son does, ADHD, and our alcoholism and our recovery parallel. And I'm really, really grateful for that today, that I'm able to spend some time with some people, dinners and late desserts, with some people that really can understand. I really, really feel at home. It says in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous that that we share that common peril. That we're able to understand each other and love each other. It says that the feeling of having shared that common peril, was that one element of cement that binds us. And so without any further ado, I would like to announce Bruce A. from Valencia, California.
Hi, everybody. My name is Bruce Angelet, and I'm an alcoholic. Believe it or not, I really am. What an order. I have to follow the two of them. I mean, that's incredible. It's an honor to be here. Carlos and Debbie, thank you for your kindness and your hospitality. And, I thought we're coming down here, and I don't know anybody in the South Bay. And by the time I got here, I feel like I'm speaking to my home group almost. I mean, I know so many of you people I've met through service and through the conventions and through H&I and all sorts of ways that we get involved in service around here. And it's just been a kick, and I'm just honored to be here tonight. I'm just so blessed to be a sober member of Alcoholics Anonymous, and I from the time I can remember, I've always felt different, like a lot of us. I felt like I didn't belong in my family. I didn't feel like the house we lived in. I didn't like Bruce. What a stupid name my parents gave me. And, you know, on the one hand, I wasn't good enough to breathe the air you breathe, but on the other hand, in an instant, I could be better than you and deserve better. And I can remember we lived in a home where we didn't have a whole lot of money. We were always fixing. My father was always out fixing up junk cars so they could drive. We could drive them so they would go. And we were always doing stuff around the house, and I knew I was better. I shouldn't have to do that type of stuff. And don't ask me where that came from, but that's just the way it was. And, you know, and I felt like I deserved a better house, better neighborhood. I deserved better parents. And, you know, and for me, it was never okay when it was, where it was. You know, my motto was, I had two things, two feelings was, is that, but you don't understand, I'm different, and it's going to be better later. And that pretty much characterizes the first quarter of my life, or maybe even longer than that. You know, no matter where I was, and I was uncomfortable, what I did, I got in trouble, whether I was in social situations, I was fortunate in a way that no matter what happened or what I did wrong or what I felt I did wrong, I always had that hope that it was going to be better. That it's going to be better later. You know, the next semester is going to be, I'm going to do better next year in school. This semester is going to be better. The next year is going to be better. Or when I go to this town, it's going to be better. And when I find the right girlfriend, it's going to be better. You know, it was okay never where I was, when I was, but it was always okay to be better. And that carried me for a long time. Because when you feel like I do, and you feel like you're nothing and you're no good, and you know, why even bother? Why open your mouth? And because you're going to do the wrong thing, say the wrong thing. The kids are going to laugh at you. They're going to make fun of you, which they did a lot, it seemed like to me. I didn't have that feeling it was over, it was hopeless. It was always going to get better. So I always had that childlike hope that it's going to get better. And that carried me for a long time. You know, it carried me, you know, it got me through school, it got me through college, it got me through, you know, and then, you know, then it was time for, then got it back for 1 second. I don't want to get ahead of myself here because I grew up in a home where my father was the alcoholic. It was very uncomfortable around our house. It was always not when it was going to happen, but it was going to happen, just trying to figure out when it would happen, or predict when it was going to happen. When is he going to start yelling? When is he going to throw the food? When is he going to grab my brother by the hair and shove food in his mouth, because my brother was so full of fear he couldn't eat at the table when my father was there, you know. All the things that we're used to and that happen when we grew up in a home where alcohol is a problem. And you know, and like you said earlier, we're scarred by that. That doesn't go away. You know, that doesn't go away. But later on, you'll see that we have a way that we can get relief from that, and we can learn to live with a lot of that, because we're the blessed ones that we get a chance to be in Alcoholics Anonymous and Al-Anon and Alateen. And you know, and I always wanted to eat fast and get out of there. At our house, it usually happened at the dinner table and on holidays. You could count on it, and on the weekends, you know. It would be at dinner table. It was very quiet, our house. It was so quiet you could hear my father putting pepper on his soup. I mean, you could hear it falling on the surface of the soup. It was that quiet, you know. It was quiet, wasn't it? It was, you know, and just hope that it didn't get worse, you know. I can remember I was in junior high school. I used to sit down at the dinner table and I would get nosebleeds, you know. Blood would just pour out of my nose, and I could get away from the table, right, you know. I never had a nosebleed except if I hit it or somebody hit me after I left house, you know. So this is what we grow up with, and you know, we all know what this is like, and we all experience it to one degree or another. But you know, I was never going to be an alcoholic, and I just couldn't wait to get out of there. And you know, and I was fortunate. I was bright enough. I got by. I got through high school. I got into college. I barely got into the college in the town I grew up in, but I got in. I barely graduated, got out of it, and then Uncle Sam was closing in on us. It was during the Berlin scare, and everybody, all my buddies, we all had our physicals. We were all 1A, waiting to be plunked into the military. And this professor friend of mine said, well, Bruce, he said, I do some research for Boeing out in Seattle. Now, I grew up in New Jersey, and the furthest west I'd ever been was Cleveland when I was 3, so I really hadn't been anywhere. And he said, if you're willing to go to Seattle, you might be able to get an occupational deferment. And I'd not heard of that term before. But what that meant was if you're working in a critical civilian job for a government agency, you don't have to go into the military because you're serving it that way. So I said, count me in. The next thing I know, I'm on an airplane on my way to Seattle, where I know it was going to be better. Well, of course, I didn't know anybody there, you know. And guess what happened when I got there? It wasn't any better, you know. Now I had a job to do, which I knew I couldn't do, you know. I knew I wouldn't be able to do it. Now, don't ask me why I didn't know it, but I just knew I wouldn't be able to do it. And the fear was incredible, and I didn't know how to deal with that. I didn't know how to say, help me, or any of those kinds of things. And so but I heard some folks that were beginning to migrate south to Southern California to the Apollo program, and I knew it would be better there. I said, oh, please, get me a job down there. I know it'll be better when I get down there. So that began a pattern. I came down to Southern California, had a new job, more responsibility, more pay, more fear. Oh, maybe the next job will be better, you know, and that didn't fix it. So then I knew the problem was that I wasn't married. I got to get married, and that'll fix it. And so I found the perfect girl. The gal lived next door to us over down here on Prospect in Redondo Beach, and she said on our first date that she never wanted to get married, and I knew she was the one for me, right? Tell me no, and I want you, man. That's the only thing that matters. If you say yes, I'm going to run the other way, and that's just the way it is. So I pursued her for a while, and we got married, and guess what? That didn't fix it either. And you know, she had a career. She was an English teacher at a local high school in Redondo Beach, and we were married. And you know, I came home from work the first night, and she had a martini ready for me. Hey, this is nice, you know. And our pattern was, I would come home, complain about my day, have a couple of drinks. She'd come home, she'd sit down, have a couple of drinks, and it wasn't getting any better. And you know, and we took turns going to see the psychiatrist. And she went for a while, I went for a while, and they introduced us to this wonderful world of Valium. And you know, because alcoholism then was treated as a Valium deficiency, so they took good care of us with Valium, and so I began taking that stuff. And you know, I used to go to work with a pocket full of Valium. I would take the vial and dump them in my pocket, and one of the people that I was working for would say to me, "Gee, I'm having a problem." I'd reach in my pocket and say, "Here, take a couple of these." And I didn't see anything wrong with it, you know. And here I am. I've got a bunch of people working for me. I have an office in Century City overlooking the courtyard, you know. And I would do things like first thing in the morning, get to work, right? Where are we going for lunch? Who's going to have the drinks ready? And that was the way it was. You know, till we knew that, I couldn't do anything. You know, we had to get that resolved, so we knew. And you know, and when I first took the job, I didn't go to lunch because I knew they would find me out. But by a short period of time after that, we were drinking 3 and 4 martinis for lunch, and I was coming back. And I never discovered uppers, so I had a problem in the afternoon. I would get real tired after 3 or 4 martinis. The only thing I had working for me was Valium, and that didn't help keep me alert. So what I would do is I used to have these occupied seats that they used to have on the airplanes, and I would hang one outside of my door, and I'd hold a meeting in the office with my staff or whoever I happened to be meeting with that day, and I would lay down on the floor because I was real tired. And I thought I was a great employee because no matter how tired I was conducting this meeting in my office. And those are the kinds of things that alcohol did. And I should have told you that when I began drinking in Seattle, when I went to Seattle, I began drinking. And it was pretty innocent at first, except I couldn't figure out why. You know, I remember we get to this bar, but I don't remember what happened till the next morning, or I would be home and I don't remember what happened after. And my favorite feeling, I guess, was, or that what would characterize me best was, what happened after? You know, I was always trying to figure out what happened after. What happened after I got to the party? What happened after I got in the car? Because I had periods of time that I couldn't account for, you know. And I had no idea what that was until I got to Alcoholics Anonymous. I had no idea that those were blackouts, you know. And I for those of you that don't know, a blackout is when your head shuts off for a period of time. It's like if you run the tape of the day, a videotape, there's a snip taken out of it, and that snip could be 1 second, it could be hours, it could be days in some people's instances. And I began having those, and to me, that seems strange, but I figured, well, what the heck? I enjoy drinking. That's not going to stop me, and it never did stop me. You know, it never did stop me. And the blackouts got to where they got. Sometimes it was kind of humorous when I woke up. You know, I'd have somebody's bikini bottom on, jumping in the pool, or something silly like that. but I never knew what was going to happen. So my wife and I were going back and forth to seeing the psychiatrist, and then we bought a house, and I wanted to buy a house, and she didn't want to buy the house, and so it was still uncomfortable, and I was getting in trouble at work because I was so full of fear that I would make the wrong decision that I didn't make any, and that got me in trouble. When you're managing 20-some people and you can't make decisions, it kind of sticks out a little bit, you know. And I remember the boss calling me and said, Bruce, we pay you to make decisions. You need to be able to make decisions instead of relying on somebody else to make all the decisions for you. And he said, even if you make the wrong one, we'll support you, you know. And I couldn't do that. I couldn't do that. So they took my job away. They said, we're going to, in fact, they're not getting rid of me. They just said, well, we'll give you another job in the company. And oh, sure. No, I quit. You know, I'm leaving. And I didn't have another job, and these people were so kind to me. They said, Bruce, stay here until you find a job. You can use your office. You can use the phones. We won't charge you anything for it till you find something that's suitable for you. And I didn't appreciate that. So what I would do each day is I would bring an empty briefcase to the office, and the company made educational programs, and I would put some things in my briefcase that they hadn't lost yet, and I would take them home and put them in my garage, you know, full of fear. Close the door, lock the garage, full of fear that I had all this stuff, and the blackouts got worse and worse, and you know, and I remember Mother's Day one year, my wife and I got in the car up in West. We were living in West L.A. I got in the car and we drove down to Redondo, back to Redondo Beach, where her parents lived over on Prospect, and I remember getting there around noon. We gave her Mother's Day present. Everything was going fine. Fixed everybody a drink. We sat down to play euchre. And the next thing, when my head turned back on again, it was dark out. I was sitting on the edge of the bed back up at our house. It turns out it was about 10:30 that night. I have zero recall of anything that happened that day from that time from when we sat down to play euchre. And I was sitting on the edge of the bed. I had my underpants on, and I was just sitting there, and the light was on the bedstand, the table, the lamp next to the bed. And my wife wasn't in bed, and I looked and I could see the light. I could see the corner of the light in the bathroom was on, so I figured she was in the bathroom. And she didn't come out, and I waited a while, and I called her. She didn't come out, so I went over, and I was able to, the door was closed, but it wasn't locked, so I was able to push on it. And it was kind of wedged closed, and I pushed and pushed and pushed till I got it open, till I get around it and inside, and here she was on the bathroom floor, and she was dead. And I'm going, I can't, what is this? You know, I had no idea what had happened. All I knew that she was turning a purple color, and I knew she was dead. And it turns out that she had taken a whole vial of Tuanols. Now, I was so into my disease and my sickness that I didn't realize how bad off she was. I could not be there for her. I could not even care for her or pay attention to her because it was all about me. And I called the paramedics. They came, and you know, and then my friend Barry came up. He drove up from down here, and he said, Bruce, you better go tell her parents. So I got in the car and drove all the way back down here after they'd left, and her father's just getting ready to go to work, and I called them back inside and told them that your daughter was dead, and they were hysterical and wanted to know what happened, and I had no idea what to tell them. Yeah, I had no idea what had happened, and why can't I remember? I want to remember, you know, and I couldn't remember, you know. And through the funeral and for the next 3 months, it was just kind of black and gray, and I don't remember. I can remember a few lucid moments, but that's about it. I can remember talking to my neighbors saying, I think I better stop drinking, giving my booze to my neighbor. And I said, here, you guys use it. And then within an hour, I'm back up at Vaughn's Market buying more vodka. And that's the way it was for me. And what happened for me finally is during that period of time, I finally got to the place, it came to me later, is that I no longer, what alcohol did for me is it took away that hope that it was ever going to get any better. I knew that any moment that I had, as clear as I could remember, I no longer had the hope of what I should do, or should I do this, or I had no longer idea of what to do, where to go, who to talk to. It was over. The hope was gone that it was ever going to be any better. And I believe for me, that's the point where it says in the book, we come to the place of pitiful and incomprehensible demoralization. And for me, that was it. It was summarized that there was no longer any hope that it was ever going to be any different, that any time I woke up or came to, it was going to be the same thing. And it would have been. And, and shortly thereafter, my mother called me from New Jersey and said, Bruce, your uncle is coming out to California, and I know you don't like him, but at least give him a call for me while he's out there. And for whatever reason, out of my mouth came the words, "No, I'd like him to come and stay with me." Now, God put those there. I didn't. That wasn't my idea. I didn't like this guy because I didn't like it. He'd look you right in the eye and tell it like it was, you know. And he didn't drink, so I had absolutely no use for him. He was a nice guy, but I had no use for him whatsoever. And so I pick him up at the airport, and he watches me for a day. And I had to go to the lawyers to deal with some of the papers with my wife's death, and he had to basically make all the decisions for me. And we get back to the house, and I picked up a quart of vodka on the way home. I said, I was going to visit with him. And he looked at me, and he said, "Bruce," he said, "your problem, when are you going to get honest with yourself? Your problem is in that glass in front of you. That's your problem." And for whatever reason, something clicked inside of me. You know, it is. You know, and maybe it is. I don't know. So I went back to see that psychiatrist and chatted with him for a while. And he said, "Bruce," he said, "maybe you are an alcoholic." He said, "If you are, the medical profession cannot help you." He said, "We don't know a lot about alcoholism." He said, "If you have a chance, it may not be a very good one, but if you have any chance at all, it's with Alcoholics Anonymous. I suggest you give them a call." And I called them, and I went to my first meeting. And it seemed like this guy preached to me all the way over, all the way back. You know, they had this meeting at this church over in West L.A. It was up on the stage behind the curtain. And I'm going, I was sick enough anyhow, but, you know, it was weird. And they gave me a big book. I remember going home that night. I remember reading it. And everywhere I had this felt tip pen. Everywhere it said God, I'm underlining, you know, God, see, it's not going to work for me. It's another God program. I had tried the church. It didn't work for me. Alcohol did a better job of taking those feelings away than the church did. But anyhow, the guy said to me on the way back, he said, okay, at that meeting, I don't remember what they said. I remember there were some people there. They said a prayer, you know, or whatever it is. But, you know, while I was there, I felt safe. I felt like I was okay for that period of time. And a feeling of comfort that came over me, a little bit of feeling of comfort that I hadn't felt. Maybe not ever, I don't know, but certainly not in a long, long time. So the guy took me home. He said, "I'm not going to a meeting tomorrow night, but I suggest you go to a meeting. Here's a book." He underlined some meetings for me. He said, "Here's one tomorrow night here." And I decided to go that next night. Now, for a long time, I felt that I decided to go because I heard something there. I probably decided to go because I didn't want my uncle to hassle me and tell me, "Get your ass to a meeting," or anything like that, or "You need to be there." So I went to my next meeting. And that was where I met some guys who welcomed me and said, "Come on in." And they took over. They took over my life. I didn't have to make any decisions for a long time. They said, "Be here at this time. We're going to this meeting. Meet us here." You know. And for a long time, I just went to meetings, you know. And I'm the kind of person that I admire people that say, "Gee, I was here a couple of months and I took this step, or I took that step." My experience has been I didn't understand any of that. I was so confused and so sick that anything that I do about the steps are things that I learned in looking back on what I had done. It was stuff that I had done because somebody suggested I do it. And is that what I did? So if you're confused, if you're early here in the program, don't worry about it. It'll all get sorted out. And so I began going to meetings. I got involved in service. God, I wish I could tell you all the things that I got involved with, but you know, I know what I'm sure about. I was about a year sober, and my first sponsor said to me, "Why didn't you invite me to this party at your house?" I forgot to tell him they were having a birthday. It's just a birthday party for a friend of mine. And I said, "Gee, I'm sorry, I forgot. Come on over." And he said, "No." He said, "Don't call me anymore." So I figured, well, he must be kidding. So the next Monday I called him, and he said he wouldn't take the call. So I went through a period of very, very great discomfort. In fact, he never did. Years later, he said hi to me at a meeting, but he never did. And I had remembered I had gone to the meeting over at Rodeo, and I remember a black gentleman, had come into that meeting. And I went back over to that meeting, and this man walked into that meeting. The meeting just came alive. The meeting just lit up, and his name is Milton. And I began chatting with him. We began talking. And I asked him one day, would he be my sponsor? And he said, "Bruce," he said, "I don't know enough to be your sponsor, but I'll be your friend. And we'll talk." And up until about 3 or 4 years ago, we talked every day. And Milton now is not well. He's suffering from Alzheimer's. But I'll tell you what, every time I think about something or I'm in a situation where I'm not sure how to act, I say, okay, God, you help me. And then I remember, okay, what would Milton tell me in this situation? You know, or what would somebody else tell me in this situation? See, the thing I believe that we have here in the program and the fellowships is that we get to have experiences that someone else has gone through. That someone else can say, hey, I had that experience, I went through it. You know, like when we went through the thing with the adoption and the baby being taken back, you know, God gives us, I believe, these experiences so that we can pay that forward. You know, Lynn had a woman who called her, and there was a woman in the Midwest somewhere that was going through a similar situation we have. And they hooked Lynn up with this woman, and she was able to share it with her, you know. And that's the way this works. We absolutely have the opportunity of being there for one another, you know. We have a gift. If we are here today, we have been given the gift, you know. What a beautiful gift, you know. And I feel that my job is that wherever I go, I need to take my sobriety with me, because if I have nothing else to take, I show up sober. I go in business situations and I'm getting ready and I say, okay, God, thank you for my sobriety. Now let's go take that with us where we're going into this business situation. And I never know what's going to happen, you know. I go full of fear, but I go. I walk through the fear. I say, okay, God, give me enough fear just so that I can walk through this thing. You go ahead of me, you know. And I can still see Milton telling me when I had to do something that I was so terrified of doing. He said, well, Bruce, what I do, he says, I go out to the car, right? Take God with me. I go around to the passenger side, right? I open the door and say, okay, God, come on, get in. I close the door, I go around to the other side, and I go on, and I know I'm going to be okay. Now, that may sound silly, like meditating for 3 minutes, but until you try it, you know, until you try it, you don't know. See, the thing that I have to learn here is that my ideas don't work, you know. My ideas absolutely don't work. So that's why I have to seek God. That's why I have to be willing to help somebody else, you know. To me, it looks like God, the way God set this, okay, we are in a game, okay? This is called God's game. It's also called life, okay? There's only one rule maker, that's God, right? We are the players. We are fortunate enough to be here because we're the players in this game. He makes the rules. It's his deck of cards, and he plays with a marked deck, right? He does. And all we have to do is seek him, right? Say, okay, God, I'm looking for you. I need your help. But he said, hey, that's going to be too easy, guys. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put this thing in between you and me. And I'm going to really make it hard, you know, because when you think you're seeking me, all of a sudden he's going to tell you, there's no God. You're a piece of shit, you know. You can't do this. You're going to fail. You're not going to be able to handle this situation. You don't deserve this. You don't deserve that person in your life. You're not good enough to breathe the air. And unless I remember to say, okay, God, I'm coming after you, and the way I'm going to get to you today is I'm going to go carry your message. I'm going to go help somebody, be they alcoholic or not alcoholic. I'm going to go show up sober and willing to help somebody. Because you know what? As difficult as that is for me to get to God, the minute I have that thought, I get this thing out of my mind, away from my ego, I'm thinking about you, I'm comfortable. I've gotten to God, see? But I can't get my arms around it because as soon as I think I got it, I don't, right? Because the ego gets back involved again. So the process of seeking God is a 1 minute at a time thing, 1 day at a time thing. Because I'll go to bed at night and say, God, I had a great day today. You know, I went to a meeting, a great meeting. I shared with some people. I get up the next morning, or before I get up the next morning, my head's up, it's full of fear. You're not going to be able to do this. You're going to do this, blah, blah, blah. Bingo. Okay. So now what I've trained myself to do recently, and these are lessons I didn't learn overnight, I guarantee you, is to say, okay, when I get into that place now, okay, who can I help tomorrow? Lynn's got a tough day tomorrow. Maybe I could help her. Maybe I'll get up early and I'll go to the store and get some milk or something before that. The minute I do that, the fear lessens, you know. So God has set this game up. He's made it a challenge, but the end point is there. We can get to God by doing something for him, for someone else, not thinking of ourselves. And it's a simple-minded approach, maybe, but you know what? It works for me. It keeps me comfortable. It keeps me in a good place, because then I can be like Milton, and I can show up with my sobriety and say, okay, when people walk in the room, I want them to know, whether it's in business or wherever they're, is I'm here to help out. Tell me what I can do to help out. And if I can do that, then I'm comfortable, and I believe then that maybe I'm showing the gratitude for the gift that I got. I certainly didn't deserve sobriety. I didn't deserve to learn about this process, to learn how to seek God, because I deserved it or because I was wonderful. You know, I'm the chosen one. Every one of us in this room today is the chosen one. God has chosen us to be here today. We'll never have another moment like today. Today is it, you know. And the last thing I'm going to share about is that a lot of people I've heard come to Alcoholics Anonymous, and I think to Al-Anon too, and say, okay, I've been coming to these meetings for a long time, and I haven't had a drink for a long time. And I'm sober a long time now. When do I get mine? You know, when do I get the job? When do I get the girl? When do I get the car? When I can think, and I can remember Alan McInnes. There's a tape around of Alan McInnes. He did a talk at the Brentwood Workshop. It's called The Point of Sobriety. And the whole premise of this thing is that what is the point of sobriety? When am I going to get mine? Alan, I can hear Alan saying it's crystal clear. The point of sobriety is sobriety itself. And if we can remember that we are chosen and that is a gift, and look at all the people that don't get it, that if we don't get to the place where sobriety is enough, we're probably going to drink again. Thank you, God, for bringing us all together. Thank you very much for letting me share.
Sorry to interrupt your viewing. Taper Dave here. Just wanted to take a second to ask you to like and subscribe to my channel. Let me know if you like what you're listening. I've got some very good talks here, and this one's a great one. Just curious, do you think this is better than Zoom? Tell me what you think. Okay, this is how I prepare my drone for launching. I like to do it inside the cab of my truck so I'm not standing outside in the weather. To install the joysticks for control, up and down, right and left, powered on. I have an Android phone that I use to connect it to the drone with. And it's actually controlled through the iPhone, through an app. Oops, wrong way. It's actually controlled through the iPhone, or through this Android phone, through the app. It's actually controlled through the Android phone, through an app, and you connect it through this short connection right here.
Remote control connected.
Remote control's connected. So I pull out the drone. I have to extend the legs. Long legs extended first, then the short legs. Remove the gimbal protector. Set that aside, then power it on one short burst, then one long burst. I lay it down. So I have to go to calibrate. So the drone's not connected yet. It shows you here as this drone gets disconnected, even though the remote's powered on. So the drone has to establish it's connected. So I go into the app to calibration mode. First I'll calibrate the remote controller. Start calibration. Out, in, oop, out, in, up, down, and then this little wheel is to control the gimbal. So it's calibrated. Go to gimbal calibration, start calibration, and then it calibrates the gimbal. what that shows up. The gimbal's moving all over the place. Changes, you can see it on the video. And I'm calibrated to take off. It's acquired 7 satellites at the moment. There are 26 satellites up in the sky, which it has to acquire before you can take off. So it's connected. It's got enough satellites. This is white. I can go to press this little arrow button, swipe right to take off, and it would start the motors if I slid this to the right. But I'll wait till I get outside. Don't want to do it inside.